Joining us now to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Arise News analyst and distinguished Niger wife, Vimba Mochihiri Ekwenyong. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Great to have you back. Seated next to presidential handshake. And TGIF, Dr. Abati and Ayo. I hope you guys have... Yes, exactly. I hope you guys have great plans for the weekend. Well, yeah. Okay.
I know that's about his plan for the weekend. He's off to Davos for the weekend. He's traveling. Yeah. I know Aaron's plan. Aaron is off to Abidjan.
Yes. Maybe watching the AFCON, the opening ceremony of AFCON.
Yes, exactly.
That should be exciting.
Yeah. And then hopefully we'll get some pictures of Dr. Abati skiing.
Yes.
Videos. All right, everybody. Good morning and warm welcome. Let's get straight into today's newspaper review. And of course, as tradition dictates, we kick off with This Day newspaper. And this day, of course, focusing on where all Nigerian eyes are today, which is Supreme Court delivers verdict on Kano, Plateau, Lagos. 4 others today. Of course, we have already crossed over to our correspondent, Godfrey Oshemege, who's going to be giving us, the blow by blow as it happens. A lot of anticipation around that. Now, above the masthead, $800 million trapped funds, foreign airlines miffed with FG over $61 million paid, say it's insignificant. Another story that has already been discussed at great length this morning. And gosh, so many sides to look at it, so many ways to analyze it. And we keep our eyes on this as it develops. Just beneath that, though, Tinubu receives briefing on $10 billion investment in nation's steel sector. Now, of course, this is a piece of good news all about the Ajaokuta steel plant, which has always been a point of controversy for every administration for a number of years now. So Tinubu has received a briefing from the steel minister, that's Prince Audu, and the defense minister, Alhaji Badaru, and they've just returned from China, so they updated him on the discussions with Chinese company Luan Steel Holding Group, who are set to build a new steel plant and commence production of military hardware in the Ajaokuta steel plant. Jindal Steel Group of India have also indicated an interest in making a $5 billion investment into the same sector. So all in all, there's an expectation of $10 billion of investment and the creation of about 500,000 jobs, both directly and indirectly, into the steel sector. If this comes together, this is going to be a very big win for this administration, of course, for Nigeria at large. So we're going to keep our eyes on that. And of course, we want Nigeria to win. So we'll be praying for those deals to come together, because that amount of capital will be a game changer for this economy. Let's move over to the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper is still leading with yesterday's big story, which is all about the banking sector. So CBN plans shareholders summit compiles new directors list, says the Apex Bank is to discuss bank's future with stakeholders, new chairman, EDs to be named soon. Of course, that's concerning Union Bank, Polaris Bank, and Keystone Banks. However, beneath that headline is this touching image of lawyers. It says the Lagos sector of the NBA, that's the Nigerian Bar Association, protesters storm police HQ over brutality against lawyers. Now, this is what has set this off is the detention and alleged ill treatment of Olumide Sonupe, who was hospitalized after he was said to have been detained by the police while seeking the bail of his client at Moshalashi police station in Alimosho area on December 30th. It's said that his health then deteriorated after he was released. He was trying to bail out a carpenter who had been arrested for being in breach of contract and was trying to secure a 30,000 naira bail for him, but found himself in the cells as well. And reports are that the way he was treated led to him being extremely weakened and his health to be in a volatile place. However, I do believe that he's recovering very quickly. So that's what the Punch is leading with. Let's head over to the Daily Trust. The Daily Trust, we trust the Daily Trust to focus on security. They say security beefed up as Kano Plateau, 6 other governors know fate today. And above that headline, in the right-hand window, bandits abduct 23 in FCT. Every day, Daily Trust make sure they give us some stats of insecurity in the nation. So they're just keeping us abreast with those numbers and keeping it tally daily. However, beneath that leading image, ICJ hearing, of course, in The Hague today. South Africa wants Israel held accountable for genocide in Gaza. We saw that launching yesterday. South African delegation led by the Justice Minister, Ronald Lamola, and an array of some of South Africa's top legal minds put their cases forward yesterday at The Hague against Israel. And, this has its beginnings in history. When you look at South Africa's apartheid history, you look at how Nelson Mandela had a close relationship with Yasser Arafat. And this is where the ANC, that's South Africa's ruling party, this is where the allegiance to Palestine stems. So historic in many ways. And that hearing will continue today. And of course, all global eyes are on that. Now, to the Tribune newspaper. Nigerian Tribune, where above the masthead in the right-hand window, 2024 budget, YFG chose 750 naira to $1 exchange rate. That's from the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Atiku Bagudu. Now, of course, just to, let me hype up Rotus. Of course, we do know that today is going to be budget day with KPMG. So I'm sure we're going to get plenty more insights on that later on. So make sure you stay tuned to Arise News. But in this interview that was featured on Nigerian Tribune, the Minister of Budget and Economic Planning is explaining that, they looked at the fluctuations of the naira over the past year, and they felt 800 naira to $1 was the average that they could use to peg concerning the budget. And, we all know when we analyze the budget and we look at what the naira is standing at currently, he's just explaining that, as economists, we don't use spot rates, we use an average rate, and we're optimistic that the rate will come down or will be able to fluctuate around that 800 naira number. Now, to the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper, again, looking at the banking sector, says experts are in cautious optimism on shake-up of banks by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, of course, what bankers are focused on right now is a recapitalization, which we can't ignore. It's on course, and, the developments with the central bank and those three banks that I mentioned earlier is something that can shake up this process. However, some experts are coming in and saying that, we're still optimistic, cautiously so, but recapitalization of the banks is still on course. Now, let's head over to Vanguard newspaper. It is a Friday, so I thought let's take something a little bit lighter. Of course, Vanguard is still leading with EduGate. That's a better edu saga. APC governors Peter Obi back Tinubu on probe. However, above the masthead in the left-hand corner, no grief for anybody. Lawyers fault police caution as army adopts slogan to fight insurgents. So there was a report that came out yesterday where the police highlighted the fact that they felt that the term no grief for anybody was a call for insurrection and crisis in the country. We all know this slogan has been popularized on social media. It's what people are just saying for fun. However, the police have cautioned people from using the slogan, saying that it would lead to crisis in the nation, that from a security perspective, they feel that the use of this slogan is difficult and is inappropriate. Femi Falana has, of course, come out to say, where does it say that in the Constitution? Can we just let people catch crews? He didn't use those words, but that was his sentiment. So that's the story in Vanguard. Now, let's round up with an international paper, The Washington Post. Now, this is probably the biggest story in the world right now from the Washington Post. Strikes target Houthi militia. So we know now that the US and UK forces, with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada, and the Netherlands, have carried out airstrikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen in response to the attacks on ships in the Red Sea. And they claim that they are yet to see any retaliatory action, although some media houses are saying that the Houthis have started retaliating. That still stands to be confirmed. However, Iran has condemned the strikes, and so has Hezbollah. Now, just to broaden the scope of this conversation, we know that we are counting down to elections in the US and the UK. Joe Biden has a lot riding on this crisis in the Middle East. They've already started calling him Genocide Joe Biden. And if you speak to Democrats in the US, they will tell you that they most likely will not be voting for Joe Biden. So what does that say for Trump if he makes it to the ballot? So that's a conversation to be had. UK, Rishi Sunak is also heading to election and is basically waging war. So conversation for us to have there about what does this look like for international relations and for these huge elections coming up this year. And of course, quickly as we round up, is that image from the Palestine yesterday, where we saw shows of solidarity for the move that South Africa has made at the International Court of Justice. Right, so much to unpack.
I mean, so much to unpack. So I'd like to start from the international dimension, like you stated. I mean, it's a very tough time for the world. South Africa going to the International Court in The Hague, Court of Justice in The Hague, to put a case across, to Israel. I think the South Africans remember their past, and they know too well what a genocide is, what apartheid is, and how this feels. But you can also see the hypocrisy of the West in all of this, the hypocrisy of the West of not being forthright with Israel, because prior to this time, Israel claimed they wanted to take out Hamas. Many months down the line, it's totally decimated Gaza, and it's unabated. So I think at some point we have to think of the future of Gaza itself. Who's going to run Gaza? There's been talk about probably, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank to run Gaza, but that conversation is up in the air. But this destruction of Gaza cannot continue because you're having a big blowback, humanitarian crisis, people constantly dying and all of that. And, people have talked about a ceasefire. It's imminent at some point, but when will the madness stop? I mean, this has raged for too long since it started, on the 7th of October last year. And there's been an international dimension, obviously, with the Houthi rebels in Saudi Arabia, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, proudly backed by Saudi Arabia, doing a lot of work as regards making incursions on the Red Sea, making it difficult for international logistics. So the problem is most ships now and most international logistical firms have to go through a longer route through the Cape of Good Hope because of this constant attack. At first it started with the Japanese ship, and now it has continued. Americans having a strike in there, to face the Houthi rebels might not really cut it, because you also have a crisis escalating in southern Lebanon with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah definitely, kicking against whatever America is saying and all of that. And you have more battles across board. And, these groups are also proxies to various countries. So Iran is also in the mix. When you mentioned Hezbollah, we all know the kind of work Iran does with Hezbollah. So it's just an escalation. And that's why, to a large extent, America will have prevailed over Israel to rein them in, because you're going to have a full-blown escalation. We only know the start. We don't know where it's going to end. This has continued. January has started. First quarter, let's say it pans out. Coupled with the fact that you still have another war raging in the Caucasus with Ukraine, and America is still pumping in money. There over $60 billion have been pumped into that war. We've not gotten resolution on that. So they are fighting on many fronts. And his own problems at home, Joe Biden, as regards the re-election, which Democrats, don't feel. Yeah, the economy is doing well, but they don't feel that sense of confidence in Joe Biden. Joe Biden is old, that's what they say. And Trump is doing quite well in the polls. The Iowa caucuses begins on Monday, so that might be the beginning of the path for Trump. Trump has his own problems too. But if you watch Fox News, they will tell you about the problems of Hunter Biden too, because as Trump too was in court yesterday, Hunter Biden was in court. So there are many dynamics across board. But I think the quick resolution of talking to Israel to be able to at least stop all of these bombardments, reach for a ceasefire, and see how to run Gaza going forward, I think will be what will change the paradigm of things, because things are really south. And see how we can quell the fight as regards the Houthi rebels that are proudly supported, by proxy states and Hezbollah and all of that in this.
And just to also add a point to what you said, Rufai. So yesterday at the ICJ, the South African mission were also able to put forward the argument that this genocide didn't begin on October 7th. So that's one of their points, is that this started in 1948. So it's been a systemic genocide that they call it. But let's see how it plays out.
In fact, I would say it started with the very heinous and dastardly Balfour Declaration.
Well, let me talk about the airstrikes, and then one other story two other stories from the Nigerian front. With the airstrikes, talking about countries whom U.S. President Biden said had supported them. They include Bahrain, the Netherlands, Canada, in supporting the airstrikes. We've been talking about the Houthi airstrikes as a support to Hamas and the war going on between Israel and Hamas. And with regards to the Arab nations, some of whom are Western allies, the world is still watching as to what position they take. We know the history between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis in 2015, where Saudi Arabia didn't quite succeed in fighting back, but also the fact that what the world wants is for the war to come to an end, and very importantly, that the airstrikes end. However, the Houthi rebels have said we're going to retaliate, that they're not going to keep quiet, they're not going to stand down, and they'd fight back against these airstrikes. So it'll be interesting to see what would come up in the next few days. I know the West would get their allies in support of them. The airstrike started with Houthi rebels. When you want to look at the history, then you have to go back to the wars, and then there are many schools of thoughts around that. But let me move on very quickly to this statement around no grief for anybody. And let me use the famous words of our president: let us breathe. In this case, not just the poor, but Nigerians. You know, in the most difficult of situations, Nigerians find a way to bring out light moments out of it, to bring humor. And I think it's a coping mechanism for many Nigerians to be able to at least continue to maintain happiness or a smile on their face in the face of current economic realities. Now, it's interesting that the police have come out very strongly against this. Yes, there were people who made criminal statements live, and they even gave reasons for that. Like the Mama Chinedu incident, we haven't forgotten about that. And a lot of other statements like that have been made boldly. Some non-state actors brandishing AK-47 on air, making statements, and there wasn't any hard line on those issues. And then ordinary Nigerians are saying no grief for anybody. Rather than spin it to show that they are one of the people, they're there to come and silence people. I'm glad that Mr. Femi Falana has come to say that, okay, come and show us in the Constitution where it says it is wrong. Rather than say, oh, don't say it's gonna go. Why don't you spin it and make it on like you said, no grief for anybody. Nigerian police force will not grieve for crime in 2024. The Nigerian police force will not grieve for insubordination in 2024. Spin it. It's popular culture. We need to move with the times. I just say that's why we don't stifle. There's no more, state stifling and all that. And because of our time, I would love to touch on the happenings in Kano. But I'll just finally say, because it's important that we're able to state this, let everyone keep calm. Politics, as we saw yesterday with the defection or non-defection of Mr. Daniel Bwala, is not a do-or-die affair. The main primary actors are not taking it to they are not tightening to their chest, let me use that word. So do not be used as a pawn in the war of political actors in politics. So whichever or however way the verdict turns out today at the Supreme Court, let everyone maintain peace and respect the rule of law as has been enjoined. And let the parties and the candidates also please speak to their party members. Let there not be any kind of protest or killings or violence because of reports. I just wanted to bring that out there this morning because politics does not have to be a do-or-die affair.
Okay, let's talk international humanitarian law, or what is otherwise known as the law of armed conflict. That's the basis for South Africa going to the International Court of Justice. And their action is predicated on the 1948 UN Convention on Genocide, which frowns at anybody being targeted on the basis of their identity, ethnicity. And South Africa is saying that is what Israel is doing in Gaza. Okay, South Africa and Israel are both parties to the 1948 UN Convention on Genocide, and to that extent, the convention says any of the parties involved can bring a matter before the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice resolves disputes, matters between states. That's why they've gone. But I would have loved a situation whereby South Africa had gone to the International Criminal Court, which is the one that tries individuals, and then target Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, take him to the International Criminal Court. Incidentally, both the ICJ and the ICC, they are based in Hague. Now, however, South Africa has received a lot of support for its action. It's been supported by the OIC states, the Organization of Islamic Countries, about 57 of them. It's been supported by the Arab League. It's been supported by Bolivia, which was the first country to, in fact, go to the ICJ on this matter. And then also by countries like Turkey, civil society groups across the world. But the question is, will South Africa be able to prove its case? Public hearings and the arguments were taken yesterday and also today. Now, will South Africa be able to prove it? Because under international humanitarian law, it's always very difficult to prove genocide. And even if you succeed in proving it, how do you enforce it? And even if, the ICJ finds against Israel, will Israel respect the outcome? So who is going to enforce the ruling? And will the decision of the ICJ be able to stop the war in Gaza? These are the questions that have been thrown up in this regard. Well, hypocrisy of the West. Israel itself says it will challenge the case in court because it says it's a blood libel. The US says it is baseless. It is counterproductive. That's the position of the US. Lord Cameron of the United Kingdom Foreign Secretary says, well, Israel is at the risk of violating international humanitarian law in Gaza. After 20,000 persons have been killed, 10,000 of them are children. So, but the big question is, will the ICJ be able to make any difference? But I get your point about, the historical support of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa for the Palestinian cause. But, we'll see what the outcome is, but whatever the outcome is, will it be enforceable? Now, the second other issue is the threat to global trade that is caused by the crisis in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. Now, the UK and the US and their allies, the Western allies, generally, about 20 countries, under the umbrella of Operation Prosperity Guardian, had given a final warning to the Houthi rebels, but the Houthi rebels have defied that warning. This week alone, in the last 1 week alone, they've had the largest attack within that Suez Canal. And as a result of that, UK and the US and their allies, they've now fought back. Al-Houthi, who is the leader of the Houthi rebels, says, well, they can only expect an escalation if they attack them. So it's not just global trade that is at risk. That Red Sea accounts for 12% of global trade. And it is the shortest route towards Asia. Now they have to go through the Cape of Good Hope. A trip of about 13 days will take 31 days. And this has driven up the cost of freight. It has increased the risk of transportation. Added to this was that the Iranians, they seized a vessel, an oil vessel, on Thursday, yesterday. The effect is that oil prices have gone up. Brent crude by about 2.5%. Texas Intermediate, WTI, by 2.4%. So the cost of energy is going to go up. The cost of transportation will go up. Already, the British are saying the justification is that their economy is going to be affected. Inflation in the UK is likely to go up by 0.5%. Food prices have already gone up in supermarkets. So this is the interconnected thing. But the more frightening thing is that the World Bank has said that global economic growth will be affected for the next 6 months with that escalation. So we all have a stake in this war. Either is South Africa taking Israel to ICJ, or the allies under Operation Prosperity Guardian trying to protect a strategic global trade route.
And a quick point of correction on my part. Houthi rebels are backed by Iran, not Saudi Arabia. I think I made it.
Yeah, they're backed by Iran.
So Saudi Arabia against them?
Yeah, so Saudi Arabia was actually fighting them. I think I made a slip of thought.
And the allies are saying they may attack Yemen because that's their base.
That's their base. Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our distinguished Niger wife in Dr. Martin's words. Thank you, Bimbai.